Dad's 65th birthday party was supposed to be a joyous occasion, filled with laughter, love, and cherished family moments. But deep down, I should have known better. In our family, things rarely went according to plan, especially when my older brother, Marcus, was involved. The dining room was a sight to behold, adorned with vibrant balloons and shimmering streamers that caught the light just right. Mom's finest china gleamed on the table, meticulously set for the occasion. Everyone was gathered around, putting on their best smiles, pretending we were the picture-perfect family you'd see in a heartwarming movie. But let's be honest, we were far from normal, and happiness? Well, that was a fleeting guest at our table. The tension in the air was subtle but palpable, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. I could feel it in the way my relatives exchanged glances, in the forced laughter that didn't quite reach their eyes. And then Marcus, ever the showman, stood up, raising his wine glass with a flourish that could have rivaled a Broadway performer. "So, Dad," he began, his voice dripping with theatrical confidence, "I have some truly exciting news to share on your special day." All eyes turned to him, expectant, almost reverent. Marcus had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. At 35, he was a wildly successful real estate developer, running his own company, married to the stunning Jennifer, and father to 2 adorable kids whom my parents doted on endlessly. Me? Well, at 32, I was the family's designated disappointment, the one who never quite measured up. Marcus paused, letting the anticipation build, his eyes gleaming with self-assured charm. "Jennifer and I have been talking," he continued, casting a meaningful glance at his wife, who responded with an encouraging smile and a nod. "We think it's time for some big, life-changing plans around here." Dad leaned forward, his curiosity piqued, his fork hovering over his plate. "What kind of changes, son?" he asked, his voice warm with interest. Marcus savored the moment, his grin widening as he dropped his bombshell. "Well, we've been looking at houses in the suburbs. You know, better schools for the kids, more space to spread out, a real family-oriented neighborhood where everyone feels at home." Mom's face lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, that sounds absolutely wonderful, Marcus," she exclaimed, her voice brimming with pride for her favorite child. "But what does that have to do with us?" she added, tilting her head slightly. Marcus's grin grew even wider, if that was possible, as he delivered the next part of his plan. "We want you and Dad to come live with us. We're thinking about buying a big, beautiful house with an in-law suite, maybe even one with a pool for the grandkids to splash around in during the summer." The room erupted in a chorus of excited chatter. My Aunt Carol, always one for family unity, started gushing about how wonderful it would be for everyone to be closer together, sharing meals and memories. Uncle Jim, ever the pragmatist, nodded approvingly, muttering something about smart financial planning and long-term stability. My cousin Beth, predictably, fixated on the idea of a pool, already imagining pool parties and lazy summer afternoons. It was as if Marcus had just unveiled a golden ticket to a utopian future, and everyone was ready to jump on board. But then, Dad's voice cut through the excitement, laced with confusion. "Wait a minute," he said, his brow furrowing. "What about this house? We've lived here for 30 years. His words hung in the air, grounding the room for a moment. Marcus, undeterred, leaned forward, his grin now bordering on smug. "That's the best part, Dad," he said. "We sell this place and use the money to fund the new house. The real estate market is scorching hot right now, and this neighborhood is really up and coming. We could probably get $800,000 for this house, maybe even more." My stomach plummeted, a cold, heavy weight settling in my chest. This wasn't just any house. This was the house where I'd grown up, where I'd had my first kiss on the front porch under the glow of a summer moon. It was where I'd celebrated my high school graduation, where I'd spent countless weekends helping Dad with repairs and renovations, hammering nails, and painting walls side by side. More importantly, it was the house where I currently lived. After my divorce 2 years ago, I'd moved back in with my parents, intending it to be a temporary arrangement while I saved up for a place of my own. But with the skyrocketing cost of living in the city and Dad's recent health issues, I'd stayed longer to help care for him, managing his medications and doctor's appointments. This house wasn't just a home, it was my anchor. Dad, sensing my unease, spoke up again, his voice gentle but firm. "That's a wonderful idea, Marcus. But what about Alex? This is her home, too." Suddenly, all eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their stares like a spotlight burning into my skin. The expectation was clear. I was supposed to nod along, agree to Marcus's grand plan, and fade into the background as always. But Marcus wasn't done. With a cruel, mocking smile, he raised his glass and announced, "Pack your bags, loser. This house is going up for sale." The room fell silent for a heartbeat, the air thick with shock. Then, as if Marcus had just declared he'd won the lottery, everyone erupted into cheers, raising their glasses in a toast to his vision. "To new beginnings," Jennifer called out, her voice bright and triumphant. "To family," Aunt Carol added, her enthusiasm unwavering. "To getting a fresh start," Uncle Jim chimed in, clinking his glass against Marcus's. I sat there, frozen, watching my family celebrate what essentially amounted to my homelessness, as if it were the best news they'd heard all year. Not a single person paused to ask where I was supposed to go. No one wondered if I had enough money for a security deposit or a new place to live. No one even considered that maybe, just maybe, they should have discussed this life-altering decision with me before announcing it at Dad's birthday party. "Now Alex can finally learn to stand on her own 2 feet," Mom said approvingly, her words cutting deeper than any knife. "It's about time she stopped depending on us for everything." "Exactly," Marcus agreed, his tone dripping with condescension. "She's 32 years old. Most people her age have their own houses, their own families, their own lives. It's embarrassing having her live here like some kind of teenager." His words stung, sharp and venomous, but what hurt even more was watching my parents nod in agreement. Dad, the man I'd been caring for since his heart attack 6 months ago, just sat there, letting Marcus paint me as a burden, a failure, a leech. Jennifer, ever the peacemaker, added her own patronizing touch. "I think this will be good for everyone," she said with a syrupy smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Alex needs to learn independence, and you two need your freedom back." The conversation turned to logistics, with Aunt Carol asking excitedly, "When were you thinking of putting the house on the market?" Marcus didn't miss a beat. "As soon as possible," he replied. "I've already talked to a realtor friend of mine. She said we could have it listed by the end of the week if we move fast." "The end of the week?" I finally found my voice, though it trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're giving me less than a week to find a new place to live?" Marcus shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "That's plenty of time. There are tons of apartments out there if you're not too picky." Mom chimed in, her tone infuriatingly helpful. "Most of what's in your room is just old junk anyway, Alex. It won't take long to move." I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to be my family, the ones who were supposed to love and support me. All I saw were strangers, gleefully celebrating my misfortune, nodding along as if throwing me out of my childhood home was perfectly reasonable. My cousins, with whom I'd shared countless memories growing up, didn't even blink. The betrayal was suffocating. "I need some air," I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I stood up from the table. "Don't be dramatic," Marcus called after me, his tone mocking. "This is good news, Alex. You should be thanking us for forcing you to finally grow up." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I pushed through the front door and stepped onto the porch, the same porch where I'd spent countless evenings with Dad, talking about life, dreams, and the future. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being kicked out of the very home I'd poured my heart into maintaining for the past 2 years. As the sounds of celebration continued inside, I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my contacts. I stopped at a name, James Morrison, senior partner at Morrison & Associates Real Estate Law. James had been my divorce attorney, guiding me through the messy aftermath of my marriage with compassion and clarity. We'd stayed in touch, and I knew he was the one person I could trust to help me now. A sharp, no-nonsense lawyer specializing in real estate transactions, property disputes, and family law, James had a knack for cutting through chaos and getting to the truth. More importantly, he listened to me, really listened, and treated me with the respect I so rarely received from my family. I dialed his number, my heart pounding, hoping he'd answer despite it being a Saturday evening. "Alex," he answered on the second ring, his voice warm but tinged with concern. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice low so no one inside could hear. "James, I need your help with something urgent. Can you pull up the property records for 1247 Maple Street? That's my parents' house." "Sure, give me a second," he said, and I could hear the faint clacking of his keyboard in the background. "Okay, what am I looking for?" he asked after a moment. "I need to know who currently owns the property," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "And I need to know if there are any liens, mortgages, or other encumbrances on the title." James's tone shifted, taking on the professional edge he used when he sensed something big was afoot. "Interesting question," he said. "According to the records, the property is owned by Clearwater Holdings LLC. There's a significant mortgage on the property, and wait, this is unusual." My heart skipped a beat, though I suspected I already knew what he was about to say. "What's unusual?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. "There are some recent filings here," James continued. "It looks like the original owners, Robert and Margaret Hamilton, defaulted on their mortgage payments about 18 months ago. The property went through foreclosure proceedings and Clearwater Holdings purchased it at auction." I closed my eyes, the weight of the truth settling over me. "So, my parents don't actually own the house anymore," I said, more a statement than a question. "Not according to these records," James confirmed. "Clearwater Holdings has owned the property for about 14 months. But, Alex, how did you know to ask about this?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what I was about to reveal. "Because I'm Clearwater Holdings." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds, heavy with astonishment. "You bought your parents' house?" James asked finally, his voice a mix of shock and admiration. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "When Dad had his heart attack, I found out they were way behind on their mortgage payments," I explained. "They were about to lose the house, but they were too proud to tell anyone, even me. So I used my divorce settlement to buy the property at the foreclosure auction and let them continue living here without telling them." "Alex, that's incredibly generous," James said, his tone softening. "But why didn't you tell them?" I sighed, leaning against the porch railing, the cool wood grounding me. "Because I knew they'd be humiliated. Dad's always taken such pride in being a homeowner, in providing for his family. I thought if I could help them get back on their feet financially, I could eventually transfer the property back to them when they were in a better place. But now your brother wants to sell the house," James said, piecing it together instantly. "He thinks he can just kick me out and sell a house he doesn't own," I said, my voice hardening. "And my parents are going along with it because they don't know the truth." James didn't hesitate. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to prepare the paperwork showing that I own the property," I said firmly. "And I want you to send a cease and desist letter to any realtor who tries to list it without my permission." "Consider it done," James replied. "I'll have everything ready within the hour. But, Alex, you're going to have to tell them the truth eventually." I nodded, staring out at the quiet street bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. "I know," I said. "I think tonight's as good a time as any." I hung up the phone, the sounds of the party filtering through the walls, Marcus holding court, no doubt spinning more grandiose plans about the house sale and how they'd spend the money. I sat on the porch steps, the same steps where I'd shared so many moments with Dad, and took a few minutes to steel myself for what was coming. My phone buzzed with a text from James, "Documents ready. Sent cease and desist to 3 local realtors just in case. You own that house free and clear. Good luck." I stood, squaring my shoulders, and walked back inside. The family was still gathered around the dining table, now deep in discussion about renovation plans for Marcus's dream house. "We could put in a wine cellar," Jennifer was saying, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "And a home theater," Uncle Jim added, nodding enthusiastically. "Don't forget the pool house," Aunt Carol chimed in, her voice bubbly with anticipation. Marcus looked up as I entered, his smirk returning. "There she is," he said mockingly. "Did you get all your sulking out of your system?" I took a deep breath, my voice calm but resolute. Actually, I need to tell you all something important. Marcus rolled his eyes. If you're going to beg us to let you stay, save your breath, he said dismissively. We've already made our decision. I'm not begging for anything, I said, pulling out my phone. I just got off the phone with my attorney. Mom sighed, her patience wearing thin. Alex, you can't afford an attorney. Stop being so dramatic. I ignored her, pressing on. James Morrison from Morrison and Associates. He specializes in real estate law. Dad's eyes lit up with interest, sensing something significant. Why were you talking to a real estate attorney? He asked. Because I wanted to make sure I understood the legal implications of what Marcus is proposing, I said, my gaze steady. Specifically, I wanted to know what happens when someone tries to sell a house they don't own. Marcus laughed, but it was a nervous sound, lacking his usual bravado. What are you talking about? Mom and Dad own this house. No, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. They don't. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes locked on me, as if I'd just announced I was from another planet. That's ridiculous, Marcus said, but his voice wavered, his confidence eroding. Of course they own this house. They've lived here for 30 years. I shook my head, my voice steady but gentle. They lived here for 30 years. But they haven't owned it for the past 14 months. Dad's face paled, his hands trembling slightly on the table. Alex, what are you talking about? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at my parents, these proud, stubborn people who had fought so hard to keep their financial struggles hidden. Dad, when you had your heart attack, I found out about the mortgage default, I said softly. You were behind on payments for almost a year. That's impossible, Mom said, but her voice shook, betraying her uncertainty. You were 3 months away from foreclosure, I continued, my tone gentle but unwavering. The bank had already started proceedings. You were going to lose the house. Dad's voice was desperate now. But we worked it out, Alex. The bank agreed to a payment plan. No, Dad, I said, my heart aching for him. The house went to foreclosure auction. It was sold to pay off the mortgage debt. Marcus's eyes darted between me and our parents, his smirk completely gone. If the house was sold, then who owns it now? He demanded. I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I do. The silence that followed was deafening, as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. Everyone stared at me, their expressions a mix of shock, disbelief, and, in Marcus's case, growing anger. That's impossible, he said finally, his voice rising. You don't have that kind of money. I met his gaze, unflinching. My divorce settlement, I explained. When Tom and I split up, I got half of everything, the house, the investments, the business. It came to about $900,000. Jennifer's mouth fell open, her perfectly manicured composure cracking. You had $900,000, and you've been living here like you're broke, she asked, incredulous. I used most of it to buy this house and pay off the remaining mortgage debt, I said. I wanted to make sure Mom and Dad had a place to live. Mom's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. But why didn't you tell us, Alex? She asked. Because I knew you'd be embarrassed, I said, my own voice catching. Dad's always been so proud of being a homeowner, of providing for his family. I hoped that maybe your health would improve, that you'd get back on your feet financially, and I could eventually transfer the property back to you. Marcus shook his head, still grappling with the revelation. So when I said we were going to sell the house, he trailed off. You were talking about selling my house, I finished, my voice firm. Without my permission. Dad's voice broke as he spoke. But you let us think we still owned it, he said, his eyes searching mine. I didn't want you to feel like you'd lost everything, I said. I thought I was helping. The room erupted into chaos, voices overlapping in a cacophony of confusion, anger, and disbelief. This is insane, Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You can't just buy someone's house without telling them. Mom was crying now, her voice choked with emotion. She saved our home, she said. We would have been homeless. Aunt Carol jumped in, her tone sharp. But she lied to us for over a year. Uncle Jim tried to mediate, his voice calmer. She was trying to help. Through the shouting, Dad sat quietly, his eyes fixed on me. Finally, he raised his hand, silencing the room. "Alex," he said slowly, his voice heavy with emotion. "Are you telling me that when we were about to lose our home, you used your divorce settlement to save it?" I nodded. "Yes." "And you've been letting us live here for free for over a year?" he asked. "Yes," I said again. "And you never said anything because you didn't want us to feel bad about losing the house?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Yes." Dad was quiet for a long moment, then let out a bitter laugh, the kind that comes when you realize you've been wrong about everything. "We've been treating you like a burden," he said, his voice thick with regret. Like some kind of freeloader who couldn't take care of herself. Mom reached for his hand, her tears falling freely. "Robert, we didn't know," she said softly. "We should have known," Dad interrupted, his voice rising. "We should have paid attention. We should have asked questions instead of assuming the worst." Marcus, still reeling, tried to regain control. "So you're saying I can't sell the house?" he asked, his voice edged with desperation. "It's not your house to sell," I said calmly. "It's my house, and I decide what happens to it." Jennifer's voice was frantic now. "But what about our plans? The new house, the in-law suite, the pool." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "You'll have to make other arrangements. This is ridiculous." Marcus exploded, his face red with anger. "You can't just sabotage our family plans because you're jealous." I didn't flinch. "I'm not sabotaging anything," I said. "I'm protecting my investment. If you want to buy a bigger house, you'll have to do it with your own money." Jennifer's voice was shrill now. "But we were counting on the sale of this house," she protested. "You were counting on money that wasn't yours," I pointed out, my tone unwavering. The argument raged on for another 20 minutes, Marcus and Jennifer growing increasingly desperate as their dream house plans crumbled. Finally, Marcus played his last card, his voice dripping with venom. "Fine," he said. "If that's how you want to be, then we'll just cut you out of the family completely. Mom, Dad, you need to choose. Either she goes, or we do." The room fell silent again, the weight of Marcus's ultimatum hanging heavy. Mom and Dad exchanged a long look, then turned to Marcus, then to me. "You want us to choose?" Dad asked slowly, his voice measured. "Yes," Marcus said, his confidence returning. "Choose between your successful son who's trying to provide for this family or your failure daughter who's been lying to you for over a year." I braced myself, my heart pounding. Marcus had always been the favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. I was certain Dad would side with him, as he always had. But instead, Dad stood slowly, his face serious, and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I choose the daughter who saved our home when we were too proud to ask for help," he said firmly. "I choose the daughter who spent her divorce settlement making sure we had a place to live. I choose the daughter who's been taking care of me since my heart attack, even though we've been treating her like she was the one who needed taking care of." Mom stood and joined us, her tears flowing freely. "I choose the daughter who put our family's needs before her own financial security," she said, her voice breaking. "I choose the daughter who's been living here, not because she needed our help, but because she was helping us." Marcus stared at them, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "You're choosing her over me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're choosing the person who's actually been taking care of this family," Dad said. "While you've been making plans to profit from what you thought was our house, she's been making sure we still had a house to live in." "This is unbelievable," Marcus said, grabbing Jennifer's hand. "Come on, we're leaving." "Marcus, wait," Mom called after him, but he didn't stop. "No," he said, turning back to face us. "If this is how you want it, then fine. Don't expect any help from us when you need it. And don't expect to see your grandchildren anymore." With that, he stormed out, Jennifer trailing behind him, her face a mix of anger and embarrassment. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim exchanged awkward glances before making their excuses and leaving as well. Cousin Beth gave a nonchalant shrug and said she'd see us later. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for Mom, Dad, and me. We sat in the living room, the silence heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I broke it first, my voice soft. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Dad shook his head, his expression resolute. "No, we're the ones who should be apologizing," he said. We let Marcus convince us you were the problem when you were actually the solution. I can't believe we were so blind, Mom added, her voice thick with guilt. All this time, you've been taking care of us, and we've been treating you like a failure. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You're not failures, I said. You hit a rough patch. Dad got sick, medical bills piled up, things got difficult. That happens to a lot of families. But instead of asking for help, you let your pride almost cost you everything. If you hadn't stepped in, we would have been homeless, Mom said quietly, her eyes glistening. Dad nodded, his voice heavy with gratitude. So, what happens now? He asked. This is your house, Alex. Do you want us to move out? I looked around the living room, at the family photos on the mantel, the worn but beloved furniture, the memories woven into every corner of this home. This is our family home, I said firmly. I bought it to keep it in the family, and that's where it's going to stay. You're not going anywhere. A few weeks later, my phone rang and Marcus's name flashed on the screen. His voice was different, smaller, less confident, almost hesitant. Alex, he said, I've been thinking about what happened at Dad's party. I stayed silent, letting him continue. I was wrong, he admitted. I didn't know what you'd done for Mom and Dad. I didn't know you'd saved their house. You also didn't bother to ask, I pointed out, my tone calm but firm. I know, he said quietly. I was so focused on my own plans that I didn't think about what anyone else needed. I raised an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. Your plans involved selling a house that wasn't yours and making your sister homeless without even discussing it with her first. I know, he repeated, his voice heavy with regret. I was horrible. Jennifer and I have been talking, and we realized we were completely out of line. I leaned back, considering his words. So, what's changed? I asked. We found another house, he said. It's not as big as what we were planning, but it's nice. We can afford it without selling your house. He paused, then corrected himself. Your house. And, Alex, I was wondering if maybe we could try to fix this. I miss Mom and Dad. The kids miss their grandparents. And I miss having a sister. I thought about it for a moment. Marcus had been cruel and selfish, but he was still my brother, and family is complicated, messy, imperfect, but worth fighting for. We can try, I said finally. But there are going to be some ground rules. He didn't hesitate. Whatever you want, he said quickly. First, you apologize to Mom and Dad, I said. Not just for the house thing, but for the way you've been treating me. Done, he said. Second, you stop treating me like I'm a failure or a burden. I'm a grown woman who makes her own decisions and takes care of herself. Absolutely, he agreed. And third, you never, ever make plans involving other people's property without their permission again. Never, he promised, his voice sincere. The road to reconciliation wasn't smooth or immediate. It took months of awkward family dinners, careful conversations, and moments of vulnerability to rebuild what had been broken. But slowly, things began to feel normal again, or at least, a new kind of normal. Marcus and Jennifer moved into their new house, complete with the pool the kids had dreamed of. Mom and Dad stayed in the family home, surrounded by the memories they'd built over decades. And I stayed, too, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because this was where I belonged. The best part was watching Dad's health improve. With the stress of potentially losing his home lifted, he started working in the garden again, fixing things around the house and rediscovering the spark that had been dimmed by illness and worry. One evening, as we sat on the front porch, the same porch where I'd made the phone call that changed everything, he turned to me, a thoughtful look in his eyes. You know what the funny thing is? He said, a small smile playing on his lips. What's that? I asked, leaning back against the railing. Marcus spent all that time calling you a loser, a failure, Dad said. But you're the one who turned out to be the most successful of all of us. I laughed softly, shaking my head. How do you figure? Dad's expression grew serious, his voice warm with pride. Success isn't just about making money or having a fancy job, he said. It's about being there for the people you love when they need you most. It's about making sacrifices for your family without expecting anything in return. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one knows you're doing it. By that measure, Alex, you're the most successful person I know. As I sat there on the porch of the house I'd saved, surrounded by the family I'd protected, I realized Dad was right. Success wasn't about the size of your house or the money in your bank account. It was about the choices you made when things got tough, the way you treated the people you loved, and the legacy you left behind. Marcus had learned that lesson, too, in his own way. And in the end, that made all the difference. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.